How to Control Your Frame 101, as requested from a comment on one of my videos. I'll leave a comment to the guy who asked for this video to let him know I've uploaded it. Hello, good sir. Thank you for the good idea. It's always good to go back to the basics. For those of you who don't know what a frame is a view, right? But it's more than just the view. The view is in your mind, right? Your frame is your expression of that view, right? Your hold over it in a social context or an intellectual context where, like a debate, for instance, your frame is, I believe this. And then other people have their frames, I believe this, right? And frames can be the same, frames can be similar, but have nuanced differences. Frames can be total opposites when people get into fights, right? Like liberal versus conservative, right? Those are two different frames by which you see the world, right? Liberals see the world more from, fairness and justice and well, it depends, if you're thinking about classical liberals, and then you get into the distinctions of like progressives and and then conservatives view the world more from a meritocracy point of view, and instead of justice, they see it as rule of law, right? And then one could say that the root of justice or the root of law is justice, and blah, 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 right? That's where you start getting into the nitty-gritty of frames, right? But frames are more than just your political beliefs. They're your religious beliefs. They are your philosophical beliefs on what you think is real, what you think isn't real, what's right, what's wrong. Men should be like this, women should be like this, people should be like this, people should treat each other like this, society, like literally everything, every belief that you have is a frame, okay? And when you are in the world interacting with other people, your frames are going to meet with others. And they are going to meet in the form of not only words, but the battle of body language and facial expressions, right? One person could say something, another person goes, right? They don't even have to say anything, but they're basically saying that sounds like bullshit or that's fucking weird, right? It happens on the level of communication. And everyone is vying for frame supremacy. One second, this fucking heater is really hot. Right. It's just like blowing straight on me. That's what she said. So, yeah. Frame control, then, is your ability to maintain your frame and to not buckle, right? To not lose control of the narrative, for instance, right? You could see it as, if you're really good at controlling the frame, you can convince other people, or at least you can convince the audience. Like, let's say you're debating with a person on a TV show or just on a couch at a house late at night, right? There's a lot of different environments, but frames are always competing with other frames. And this is something important that you have to learn for your life, for socializing when you're dealing with your friends and your colleagues and your associates, and then even when you're on dates, right? Women will judge you based on your frames because she's looking for a connection through your frames, right? Do you have similar worldviews, or at least do you understand each other's worldviews? You don't have to be completely similar, but that does create a lot of connection. And when you do assert your worldviews, is there consistency behind them, right? Because if there's not consistency, she can lose trust for you. She can lose respect for you. I don't know if on my screen the the video just went out for a second. I don't know if that was seen on your end. Maybe someone texted me or called me, so the app had a little bit of a kerfuffle. But there's a lot of different reasons why frame control is really important in social, sexual, romantic contexts, okay? And really with dating, yeah, it has to do with connection. It has to do with trust, right? If she sees that you're inconsistent, you don't walk your talk, then, she loses trust for you. But also, like, a lot of what we see as lust comes from women respecting you. And a lot of women's respect is, do they see that you are holding a strong frame? Because women do want a strong man. You don't have to be stereotypical Arnold Schwarzenegger type of masculinity. You can be very feminine, but you have to be strong in that femininity, right? You have to have enough masculinity that you're not a woman, right? But you can use a lot of femininity in the way you express yourself. And I should do a video on that because that's another thing that was requested, because not every man is going to be your typical macho man. And actually, to be honest, most of the ladies' men that I've known in my life are more feminine, or at least they have a large pigment of femininity in their expressions. I mean, I would say they're dominantly masculine, like that's the majority of their energy, but they have a lot of femininity in there. It's actually one of the most seductive ways to go about things. You wouldn't think so. You kind of have your mind set on this, like, oh, it's the super, jacked up guy. That's because you're seeing the world from a male view, right? The male gaze. But that's not really women's ideal. That's men's ideal, right? We're attracted to it. It's a little bit homoerotic, to be honest. I'm not saying it's not cool, right? Fucking Space Marines and Warhammer 40K and, Primarchs and big, strong men. I mean, it's cool because we want to be that, but it does kind of sound gay too when you're like, yeah, I like big, strong men, right? And I worship them and I look up to them, and it's like, oh, okay, maybe, right? But women do like that to a certain extent, but seduction is about more than just that, but that's a totally different subject. So, frame control 101. So we're going to go over some like rules and strategies that I have, right? So I'm going to put on my glasses so I can read the screen a bit better, and I'm going to look even nerdier. I don't know. This shirt's okay. It kind of like has a weird cut. It either makes me look buff or it makes me look fat. I don't know. I'm still not sold on it. It's comfortable though, so that's the most important thing. So, rule number 1. This is like the number 1 rule, but it's also the most dangerous. So this is believe your frame. Like, you really have to believe what you believe, okay? And you've met people who, they're like, hey, I believe this, but, it could be wrong and this and that. You're not really convinced, right? If someone comes up, they're like, well, maybe, I don't know, and they don't really seem confident, you're not going to believe what they believe. You're going to be much more hesitant to believe what they believe, even if it's the truth, right? Even if their view is the truth, right? If someone, let's say mathematics was really difficult to understand and someone said something, simple, like 2 + 2 = 4, but they weren't really confident in it. If it wasn't such a wide known, obvious fact, you would go, I don't know, because a lot of what we find convincing is about the performance that people put on when they are telling their view of the truth. And when they seem confident, but also many other things, when they're entertaining, right? You have to be entertaining with your frame, right? You have to use good language, right? Because you can meet a person who's like, well, it's for this and for this reason, then this, right? They have strong logic, which is another half of it, right? Which we'll get into in a second. But they don't have good rhetoric, right? So rhetoric is persuasive and logic is convincing, right? But at the same time, rhetoric is also convincing. And for the most part, actually, rhetoric is stronger than logic, right? Unless you can trap the really entertaining, persuasive person, right? There's tons of people on the internet who are like really persuasive and cool and popular, but if you actually look at their beliefs, they're pretty fucking stupid, right? When you actually get them cornered, right? Because they're really good at making you think they know what they're talking about. And they have enough surface level facts that you kind of get entranced by it, or at least a lot of people get entranced by it. Now, you might be saying, well, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if people get entranced by it. Well, that's a good point, but it's also a frame. And that's also a very naive way of looking at the world, right? You should strive after the truth as much as possible and question your beliefs. And you're going to be wrong a lot of times. But the problem is then you're not going to be convincing. It's a very sad fact, but it's how the world works, and you have to get used to it, right? So if you want to be someone who people look up to, you can't be wishy-washy unless you're not really trying to die on that hill, right? You got to choose your battles correctly, right? But I'm kind of like getting ahead of myself, right? I'm giving a lot of little tips in between. So let me go step by step to make it kind of easy. So the first one is you have to believe your frame, okay? So it's difficult to do when you haven't figured out what you actually believe. But one of the best ways that I've actually seen to figure out what you believe is to hold a point of view in your mind and be like, okay, this is kind of what I believe, and to fight really hard for it, right? And be as persuasive and as thorough as possible in explaining it and expressing it. You will get challenged, right? And then you will be opened to new ideas. Now, that doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong. And there is a possibility of being so open-minded that your brain fucking falls out, right? If someone's telling you you need to be open-minded, it's just a rhetorical trick to be like, you need to agree with me. Because your retort can always be, well, why don't you be open-minded, right? The response to, be open-minded is, I am, and you're still wrong, right? I've considered the possibility of your, point of view, and I think that's wrong. But you have to really believe it, right? Because you can use all sorts of rhetoric and logic, but if you don't believe what you say, people are going to call bullshit, right? And that's what happens with a lot of these pundits, these people who, they're very popular. So on one hand, you can say they're successful, but it's very easy to see through, and they eventually get revealed, right? The truth eventually wins out, which is always true. The truth will win because the truth is the truth, right? Anything else will fall away. So one of the best strategies actually is to practice being so sure of yourself, even if you're not as like a deliberate lie, because to the best of your knowledge, this is what you believe. Philosophically, relationships should be like this. People should be like this. This is right. This is wrong. You should hold on to it as strongly as possible, but you have to have this like little thing in the back of your mind that goes, when I'm in private, I need to like take back whatever I'm figuring out while I'm arguing with this person. They might have some good ideas, but don't ever admit it to them, which is one rule that I'll unless like they genuinely convince you and you genuinely think they're right. Because most people are just trying to fuck you. Most people with their views are just trying to win. Like most people are playing a game of like primal monkey bullshit. And they're not actually that concerned with the truth. They're concerned with being a part of the truth, right? And they're going to follow their emotions as a guide. That's why rhetoric is so powerful. And the reason why you need to stick to your frame as strong as possible and have no doubts, like to show no doubts, express no doubts. Now, this can be dangerous if you do start to believe your own bullshit, right? That's why you always have to have this little thing in the back of your mind that's like, when I'm in private, I'm going to question this. But when you're expressing yourself, be as sure as possible. And then you can actually see the results of your like debating. People will like, they might submit to it, but they don't necessarily agree with you. It's very rare when someone agrees with you, right? Especially if the views are too much in opposition and your view is, in their view, evil, right? That's what a lot of happens with conservatives and liberals, or like this religion versus this religion. It's very hard to create a bridge because these people fundamentally see each other as like, not just wrong, but like evil, okay? Which is a very important thing we have to understand later. But basically, if you want to get good at frame control, you just have to like fucking believe it as much as possible. So you have to brainwash yourself, right? But if you do this intentionally, like you know it's like a thought experiment, like, Descartes' demon thought experiment. Like, is this world created by a fucking, evil demon? And you follow the logic as long as possible to see what would be the consequences of that truth, or brain in a vat, right? We're all just living in a simulation. Brain in a vat is essentially just simulation theory. What would be the consequences of that? What would be the proof of it? You can try testing the opposite of what you believe. You're a Christian. Okay, pretend to be a Muslim. If you're a Muslim, try to be a Buddhist. Like, have some fun with it. But when you're expressing yourself, as long as you're not intentionally lying, I'm not advocating intentionally lying. So do not get me fucking twisted. And if you do, you're wrong, because I'm not advocating that. What I'm advocating is an experimental leap of faith. That's what I'm advocating. As long as you don't say, I know this is the truth. You just argue, I think this is the truth, right? But you have to remain sure of it in the way you express yourself, right? People will often confuse sincerity with confidence. And I'm asking you to have sincerity and passion. But people are going to respond to it in the same way that they do confidence, which is actually what I teach guys when they're learning how to talk to girls. You can't fake confidence. Confidence only comes from results, right? But you can have sincerity, right? You walk up to a girl and you just feel sincere about the way you express yourself to her. It's going to actually come off very similar to confidence. It's going to be very attractive because your frame, right? When you go talk to a girl, this is a really good way of thinking about it. When you go talk to a girl and you try to, like, you know, get her phone number and ask her on a date, your frame, there's an implicit frame. There's an implied, if everyone's watching, the frame is this guy believes he can fuck her or he can get her out on a date or get her phone number, whatever, right? But really, at the end of the day, you believe you can fuck her because if you didn't have some shred of a belief, you wouldn't have tried. That's why some women get so testy with men approaching, because the man is essentially saying, in no uncertain terms, I think I can fuck you, right? And that can sometimes cause women to be offended because they, you know, presume, oh, he only wants sex. Even though it's not true, she might presume that based on your behavior or based on, you know, she's just fucking psychotic. But you do want to fuck her. But the question is that the only thing you want from her, right? But something in your behavior might show that, right? You might come off like a fuckboy. Okay, he only wants sex. Fuck this guy, blah, blah, blah. Or sometimes, like, a girl might think you're so not in her league that she's disgusted by the fact that you even thought you had a chance in the first place, right? But there's a frame there, right? And so frames can be things that we don't even necessarily express verbally and directly. They can be things that are lingering under the surface, right? Like, you know, someone responds non-verbally to something. There's an implicit frame being shown to people who can read that body language that you feel this way about that thing because you're showing it, right? Your behaviors. That's why people look at body language and listen to vocal tonalities and this and that, and why it's so important in seduction is because the woman is paying attention to the real juice, right? You're saying this, but you're really saying this with your body and your eye contact. She's going to believe this because it's more convincing, right? So you have to really, 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 really believe whatever it is. Asking your girl on a date, debating philosophy, politics, whatever. So the second rule is learning rhetoric and logic as an actual skill, right? Now, some people think that these might be opposed to each other. No. Logic, like when people say something like, oh, like it's something kind of typical in the dating community, people will say, oh, women aren't logical. That's retarded. Women are logical. But they will sometimes use their emotional reads more as their premises, right? Because if you actually understand logic and study logic as a formal subject, right, you understand that logic isn't a system of beliefs. Well, I guess there is an implicit frame in logic, right? A presupposition, an axiom of logic that logic works, right? Which, you know, you get into like, who the fuck am I thinking about? The Critique of Pure Reason, Immanuel Kant, right? And the Critique of Practical Reason, right? He's going into that assumption that logic can actually lead you to truth, right? Or you get into Gödel's incompleteness theorems. I know this sounds really nerdy, but like just stick with me if you're like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? Some people might get it, and it's just an important note for them, but I'll be done in a few seconds. Like Gödel's incompleteness theorems, right? When you have a sufficiently complicated system, I forgot the exact, formulation of it. A system cannot be both consistent and complete. It has to be one or the other, right? A sufficiently complex system or something like that. So I guess, and that's their frame. That's their belief on the idea if there's a frame within frames, right? But essentially, logic is a glue that connects ideas, right? Rhetoric is the way that you paint the things that are being glued together. Okay, I'll say that again. So logic is the way that you glue ideas together, right? So we call them premises. right? It's the typical one that you hear in logic, right? Socrates is a man, men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal, right? You check his identity that he's a man, you establish an idea of men being mortal, they can die, and therefore, it's kind of like a chain link, like this links to this, and then you end with a conclusion, right? Because 2 equals 1 plus 1 equals 4 divided by 2. Like they're all equal, but they have different ways of expressing themselves, right? So you can say 2 in a lot of ways. You can say it as 2. You can say it as 4 divided by 2. You can say it as 1 plus 1. You can say it as, 100,000 minus 99,999, right? Or, sorry, 98. There's a lot of different ways of expressing it. That's rhetoric, right? And the tool of rhetoric is very heavily reliant upon your body language and your vocal tonality and the way you express yourself and make it entertaining, because people can't get bored with it, which I might have accidentally done when I started going all fucking nerd. But I might have actually appealed to a certain group, right? So it's very difficult to hit everybody, right? You can't appeal to literally everybody, especially when you're doing YouTube video to a general audience. You're going to hit specific demographics. That's why there's certain kinds of people for certain kinds of people, right? The nerds are going to like the nerds, just typical, like stereotypical ideas, jocks and nerds and whatever, right? Obviously, people are more complex than that, but certain rhetoric, certain ways of expressing yourself, certain words, attitudes, some people like cocky people, some people like reserved and, not arrogant people, because they believe that those people and they don't like those people because it reminds them of, someone they hated in high school, right? So it's very, very, very difficult to get good at rhetoric. It's also very, very difficult to get good at logic, because you have to study the ways that things connect with each other. And it's very fucking boring for certain people, right? I very much like it. I didn't so much get into symbolic logic. I slept most of those classes. I was like, all right, I could sit here and like really try hard to understand this shit, but I'm not really super interested. I think I got the gist of it. But I like logic more in practice, right? Because at the end of the day, things are very simple. I did like set theory. I didn't really understand it too much, but I liked it. Anyways, right? Going on tangents. For instance, like I'm not going to be good with people who want like quick, snappy videos. I'm just not that person, right? If I'm one-on-one with you, I can switch to that. But if I'm giving a generalized video out to the world, I would prefer to over-explain for many different reasons, right? And that's how I'm going to teach you, because I believe that unless I give you very, very detailed explanations, you're not going to understand on a deep level. And if you're not going to understand on a deep level, you're not going to be that good. And that is echoed from my experience, okay? But rhetoric is the way you express yourself. The words you choose, the way you dress is part of your rhetoric, right? It's not just about, your vocal tonality and the words you choose. It's the way you look at people. It's who you choose to address in the first place. That's more of a strategy of rhetoric, but it still falls under like persuasion. Neither is superior to the other, right? Someone who's good at logic can easily out-wrestle a good rhetorician, because let's say someone's like super confident. They're like, hey, what's up, guys? Everyone's laughing at them or laughing with them, and they're kind of like cool and this and that. But then this, dumb, or not dumb dude, but like really boring nerd is just like, okay, but why is that? Why? And then like walks him through his logic, and eventually the guy's like twisting himself in circles. And even the stupidest person is like, oh yeah, I guess it doesn't make any fucking sense, right? But at the same time, a good rhetorician will be really good at, if he has enough logic, he'll be good at playing the crowd and will make the logician look like a fucking nerd, right? He might make him look too simple. He can obfuscate that's a fancy word, the kind of the battlefield, the Colosseum, right? So that takes us to the rule number 3, or like, the third point, is that truth is the ultimate judge of truth, because the truth is the truth. That is a reflexive, eternal, reflexive means like X is X. That's a reflexive identity, right? Just X is itself. But the truth is the truth, okay? And no one who says otherwise is correct. Even if they convince you, they're fucking wrong. The truth is the truth, right? And there are truths. If you say truth is relative, that's inherently a contradiction. I hate when people say that. It's fucking stupid because you're asserting an absolute truth by saying truth is relative. It's inherently contradictory. But for the most part, like I said, the thing you have to accept about the world is that people aren't going to act that way. And if you're choosing to interact with people, you're not doing it just to jerk off your ideas, right? Mental masturbation. Like, this is what I believe, and I'm just saying it for the sake of saying it. The reason you're expressing yourself in the first place is in order to possibly help other people. Because again, if you have the truth on your side, which everyone believes they do to a certain extent, and they're defending it, they, for the most part, 99.9% of people are doing it in order to win. And they see it as winning. Most conversation or that comes in, like, becomes a debate of some sort, even on a light level, is really just a wrestling match happening on the intellectual level. Even most intellectuals are nothing but meathead, roided out fucking steroid junkies, but with their mind. And the only proof that you need is to watch them debate each other. And when they get all like, yeah, I'm right. It's the same thing as some dude knocking out a dude in the ring and going, yeah, I'm the fucking best. They're just doing it with ideas. Right? And that's why I don't take most intellectuals seriously, because I can see that they're not actually concerned with truth. Right? All you have to do is watch their body language. It reveals them. It reveals their intentions. Right? And if someone has a trained eye, it's going to make their argument fail because they're going to see deep down what that person is actually trying to do. Now, that doesn't mean all people can see that, right? So that means in order to fool, if you're lying, or convince, if you have the truth on your side, a lot of people, you kind of only need to be like operating at a C level, right, of persuasiveness or logic. If you want to convince a lot of people, you're going to have to be better, right? But for the most part, most people are going to see frame battles, right, as a contest in a coliseum, but on an intellectual level. But sometimes, a lot of times, it spills over into physical violence, right? Religious wars, or people pretending the war is over religion, but really it's about money or dominance or power or pussy or something, right? But it's a frame battle. I deserve this. This is our land. This is our, right? Most people see it as a Colosseum battle. And there's a winner and there's a loser. And who that's determined by, right? A conservative and liberal can get into an argument, and the liberals will post all over YouTube and Instagram, oh yeah, he got owned by da-da-da-da-da. And then the conservatives will go, yeah, he got owned by facts and logic, right? And they'll both like, yeah, I won, right? And even if 99 people out of 100 say you won, but it's not the truth, it's not the truth. But for practical, like, persuasive reasons, it does actually matter, right? But some battles can't be, like, let's say, you know, some celebrity gets in a fight with you for some reason on Instagram, right? And they have 10 million followers. Well, their 10 million followers are very likely to, like, support them, right? And so they'll consider you, oh, yeah, you know, he lost that debate or something, right? And you really couldn't have won in the first place, right? So that's when we start getting into these little strategies, right? So the one I was just talking about, well, let's go, let me stop getting too digressed, right? Let's go from 1 to 8. I just have some random 8 ideas. When you're proposing whatever it is, try to come from a place of truth and from love. I know that sounds gay, the second part, right? But it's true. And this is one thing you can always keep in your back pocket when someone is trying to fuck with you. Most people trying to persuade you are trying to own you. They're trying to dominate you. It's a type of mounting. People really are this animalistic. And you'll learn this if you start paying attention, right? But that's a view of mine. You might not believe that. You'd be like, oh, it's fucking weird of you to say. Like, why are you painting everything so animalistically? Because I spent a lot of time watching and people react animalistically when they get into these supposedly intellectual affairs. They start posturing in a very gorilla-like way. So I came to that conclusion because of that premise, right? And the observation and lots of evidence in favor of it, that a lot of people are really just expressing their animal tendencies of dominance or submission or victory and defeat through the realm of intellect, right? Right. A lot of times when guys are in the room with you and they're talking to you, they're posturing in this so that they can look good to the girls, right? Always, most conflicts, even on a subtle level, are about power, pussy, money. Power, pussy, money. You can always boil down most things to that, right? There's the secret one, truth, but most people are not that interested in it. But you need to come from a place of love, and there's a reason why. Because it's stronger, okay? Now, that doesn't mean you have to be fucking tree-hugging pussy, hippie. In fact, a lot of people who are that are actually like some of the like worst people you'll ever meet, right? Because they're hiding behind a pedestal of moral superiority and using it. They're using it as a mask, right? Also something you'll learn if you spend enough time around people in those environments. They could be real fucking shady and shitty, and just as bad as anyone else that they say that they are critical of. But you have to come from a place of compassion, right? And kindness is maybe a better word if you think love is too gay. And the reason is because it's more closely aligned with the truth. Because if you're debating with someone, it's a very simple question actually, and you can always think about this when like I said, someone's trying to fuck with you. I'll get back to my original point. Always ask yourself, do I think this person is coming from a place of compassion, right? Are they genuinely like caring about me, right? Like I've met people who are like really strong proselytizing Christians who are trying to convince me of their faith. I can feel, oh, you can be here, baby. I got some dinner made for me. Looks amazing. I'm going to try and finish this video up. It's probably going too long. 32 minutes. Not too bad. Thank you, baby. Yeah, now I'm hungry. Okay, don't look at the food. So, fuck. I can smell it too. Oh yeah. I could feel their love. Like I could feel they genuinely believed it, right? So they had the truth, and I genuinely felt like they actually wanted to save me, right? Or, I was learning, paying someone to teach me, how to play better Dota or how to play better Magic, right? I was paying them, right? So they were coming from a nice place because when you tend to give people money, they love you, right? But there was still, that doesn't mean it wasn't there, right? It was on a transactional level, but it was still there. And I could feel like they were genuinely trying to help me, right? That's what made them a good teacher, right? So this doesn't have to be seen as a hippie thing. It just has to be seen as like when you're trying to convince someone, come from a place that you are trying to help them, right? But then you have to be careful with it. Don't seem like you're some fucking preacher like, oh, let me help this ignorant mass of sheep and I shall be their shepherd, right? But really deep down beneath that is, a lot of times cronyism and charlatanism, right? But people are going to feel your intentions, right? So I want to train you to come from that good intention so that when you are expressing yourself, some of that might imbue itself. But people can have good intentions and have the truth on their side and suck at persuasion, rhetoric, and logic, right? Because they're not trained. It's a skill, right? But it's a good starting place. Strategy number 2. If you see that they're coming to fight you, which is most of the time, right? But you can tell, look for the body language. Look for the snobby body language, aggressive body language, dismissive, annoyed body language, contemptuous tonalities, like sarcasm. As soon as you see that, you need to go full fucking shields, right? Like fucking Data, put full shields up, right? And understand that, give them no quarter. even if it just means like giving them the dead face. The dead face is like one of the strongest tools you'll ever have, ever. Just like, yeah, okay, cool. Like when you know someone's just fucking with you and bullshitting you and they're like, oh, and they're just trying to like manipulate you. Just go, yeah, cool, right? Just placid, nothing. Don't give them anything, because all they're looking for is how to control you. And because again, on a practical level, persuasion is about a coliseum. When other people are watching the fight, right? Two gladiators going at it. When you just do this and you're like, he's just hitting your shield. But even if everyone thinks that he won, if you don't actually like look defeated, he didn't actually land a blow on you, right? But that's very hard to do when someone is fucking with your rhetoric and logic. And they're like, well, you're wrong about this. And why do you think this? And you don't have an answer for it. Even if you have the truth on your side, you're like, right, stumbling. They just landed a hit. Your head's off, right? Even if you actually have the truth, because maybe you're bad in front of crowds. Maybe you're not very well spoken. Maybe you have a fucking stutter. I don't know, right? Or maybe you're wrong. You could be wrong too, right? And that's something that you have to consider, right? But if you see someone's trying to fuck with you, do your best to go, okay, this isn't about truth. This is about someone trying to fight me. And you have to have a little bit of fight in you, right? But you can't get too caught up into it, right? Because then you're like, which you're going to be. You're going to get caught up in it, right? It's almost impossible not to. But every time you get caught up in it, it's just kind of like dating. Every time you catch yourself texting a girl too much, being too interested in her, being, smiling too much, leaning, you catch yourself in retrospect and you go, fuck. Yeah, that's why she rejected me, this or that or this or that, right? And you'll become trained. But if you catch yourself in a fight, and you know it's a fight by their body language, try to give them nothing, because that's all they're looking for. They're just looking to be the top dog. They're not actually looking for truth. Strategy number 3, if you're dealing with a hostile audience, right, your job is not to convince them. Just give up the idea of convincing them, right? You're in 1 in a fucking 10,000 you're able to do that. Your job pretty much is to make you look like a human. You want to humanize yourself, right? So still put your shields up, right? But try to be as calm and as nice as possible. Because if the person you're talking to is hostile towards you and the other people in the room are also on their side, you can't give them any quarter, because they'll be like, yeah, we slayed the demon, right? But you have to also not give them any evidence that you are the evil person they think you are, because they're being hostile because they see you as a threat. Hi, Nana. My cat has come to join me. Hello. And yes, please show everyone your ass. Yeah, I'm sure they want to see you twerk. There you go. Okay. So now she's rubbing on the camera. No, let Dad do his video. 1 second. She's so cute and adorable. Oh, but then now she's knocking my phone into my food. Now she's squirming. Look at this beautiful girl. She's gorgeous. She's making the video even cuter. Oh, sorry. Let me hold you like this. Shake it, shake it, bulka. Okay. You're famous now, Nana. Your face. Come on, darling. I love you. I'll see you in a second. Okay. Ugh. All right. So, as I was saying, most people, when they are, when there's a hostile audience, they're just looking to kill you in intellectually or really, right? You've seen how heated people can get in debates and the look in their eyes. It looks like they want to murder you, bro. And in a lot of cases, they would if, you were in a slightly less civilized environment. Which is something that's really hard to accept when you see the actual feelings people are putting out. But your goal is to make yourself not look evil, because they think you're evil. You have to humanize yourself, and the most human thing you can do is just seem chill, seem calm, and come from a place of love. Be like, hey, I get you feel this way. right? But I think this is right, or I think this. Yeah, yeah. Right. But you also need to look strong, because if you look weak, they're not going to have pity for you because they don't see you as human, right? Or, not maybe that extreme, but like, let's just use that as a hyperbole, right? They don't see you as worthy of empathy. So they're just going to take it as a chance to like shit all over you. Okay. Strategy number 4. Now, if it's an audience that's an ally of yours, your job is to stick to the strong points, stick to, what is accepted and right, because you're assuming it is right. Like, I'm not just saying you toe the party line or you 1984 Big Brother bullshit, right? But stick to those things, because, you don't stray too far from the orthodoxy of your group either. If you have some maybe, nuanced beliefs on things that might alienate people who are on your side, you can keep those for a private conversation, because you're dealing with people in mass. And when you're dealing with people in mass, you got to be careful, right? Now your job is to convince them, right? But if at the very least, just look like, you're part of, you're giving the traditional orthodox answers. If you're interested in persuasion, right? If you're hyper interested in the truth, right, then, be as ruthlessly nuanced as possible, but there's a time and a place for that. Now, I'm a person who's like, even with people who are agreeing with me, like, I would get heated over like small details, right? But there's a time and a place. Picking your battles, right? Always pick your battles, which a lot of this is really about, right? If you're with a hostile audience, you're with a supportive audience, right? Picking if you should even get in a fight, right? Is it even worth getting in a fight? Sometimes dismissing someone is the right thing to do, but sometimes dismissing someone makes you look weak. It depends on everyone. If everyone agrees that this person's being a dick, you can dismiss them and it's fine. If everyone is like maybe open to their ideas and you dismiss them, then you look like you're running from a fight, which has consequences in people's opinions of you, which on a practical level does matter, because we're literally, like, the fundamental idea behind this video is discussing frame control, not necessarily truth, okay? But the truth is the most important thing. It takes precedence. At the end of the day, you're going to choose truth, right? You have to know when to stop, too. You have to know when to let go, right? That means not saying that extra thing that you wanted to say, right? Like, I got into an argument with a guy a month ago. It's a super complicated story, but essentially, like, I was making my points, and then I added this one little sentence that I definitely shouldn't have, and I knew it crossed the line, and it pissed him off. And then he saw me as an enemy, right? So if I just held my tongue and knew when to stop, things would have been better. It would have been more persuasive. Now, in the end, he still admitted I was wrong, but there was a huge conflict before that, right? So I said all the good things, then I said that one sentence, and he got really mad and angry with me, and then we had kind of a falling out, and then a few days later, he admitted he was wrong, because he was wrong, right? But it would have been so much more smooth, and credit to him for admitting he was wrong, but then he went back to being an asshole 2 days later. A little bit, not completely, much less than before, so it was improvement. So, props to him. But you need to know when to stop, but also know when to stop the argument altogether. Like, and that's usually when someone's in a frenzy mode, when they're just like fucking seeing red, or they're just like in their own brainwashed fucking vat. That's when you stop, right? Because there's no point, right? And when you don't feel like you're learning anything, because a lot of this is just you're polishing your skills. Once you feel like nothing's being gained, just leave. Doesn't matter if everyone in the room thinks you're wrong. Yeah, you got to know you're wrong. Ha. Who gives a shit? You weren't going to win them in the first place, right? All you're doing is wasting your time. Strategy number 7. You do need to learn logic, right? And use it actively. The Socratic method is one of the best, right? The Socratic method, if you want to understand the traditional way of it, go read Plato's writings, right? And essentially the conversation would go like this. This person says this. This person says, oh, well, why do you believe this? And they say, well, this. And they say, okay, well, in this circumstance, do you think that this is right? Or here, is this a contradiction? Well, I think in this circumstance, this, and in this circumstance, this. And you go, okay, well, what makes this circumstance? You just go step by step. And usually you go backwards. They say something, and you take one of the things, and you go down, and then down, and then down. Like, why do you think that, I can think of a whole host of issues, but I don't want to choose anything so controversial, right? You can come up with your own, right? I wanted to like just start dishing out things, but I realized that like the moment I say it, it just creates too much polarization, which is great. I like, look at me having fucking restraint, right? You need to have the moral high ground, right? That's another one. You really, really need to have the moral high ground. Most of these Coliseum fights are really about, like, moral high ground is one of the most fundamental ways to be like, I'm better. It's a step higher than the animalistic kind of dominance, actually, because even if someone is like killed, but they have the moral high ground, now they're a martyr, and that's really dangerous to the people who are fighting against you. This happens a lot in politics, right? This side will say this side is evil because of this, and then they'll do the same thing that the other side does, and they'll try to justify it, like, oh, well, you went low, so we're going to go lower, this and that. But the problem is the moment you do that, you lose your moral high ground, and you've now vindicated the other side. Because even if you actually are right, because you've kind of stepped over that line, you've given people are now like, oh, maybe we're the bad guys, right? Be like, okay, well, we just accused them of doing all this, but then now we're doing it, and it's very unpersuasive, right? There's a lot of that actually going on in certain areas of the world and certain political ideas, right? I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong, but I am saying that you lose a lot of persuasive power when you act like the people that you are accusing of acting like this. And then people are who are maybe on the fence or maybe open to being persuaded go, oh shit, maybe I'm the bad guy, right? And then they'll swap sides, right? It happens all the time. So be very careful with never doing the thing you're accusing other people of doing, which you just shouldn't do as a moral, right? Truth and morality and integrity are super important here. But again, I'm discussing purely from a rhetorical, logical point of view, right? Or purely from a frame point, a persuasive point of view, right? So never lose the moral high ground, no matter how much you're tempted to. And that can take a lot of different forms, right? And then kind of going back to the first part, only admit defeat when inside, like internally, because you know that most people are, unless it's like a revelation, like, oh my God, you might actually be right. Because that's a strong sign of character and actually can be very persuasive, because then people will go, oh, well, this guy actually has, he'll admit when he's wrong, right? He'll admit when, but it has to be something you genuinely are like, oh, wow, you know what? That actually might be a good point. So that can be very persuasive. And then people are actually more likely to believe you later, right? But you should only do that in very rare circumstances where you feel like the person's actually coming at you with good intentions and they're actually right. Because even if they're right but have bad intentions, you don't have to tell them. You're under no obligation to confess to people when you're wrong, right? Just stop arguing the point, because then at that point you're lying if you still hold your belief even though you think you're wrong. Just be like, okay, well, hey, man, good talking to you, and then just leave. But don't admit it to them, because those people might just use it as a way to go, gotcha, right? Unless in that specific context, you're trying to train your ability to deal with embarrassment, and deal with, practice admitting that you're wrong in front of people. A lot of these things can have a lot of nuance, but purely from a persuasive point of view, in some cases, though, here's a good nuance for persuasive reasons. Like, even if people really hate you and are really hostile towards you, if you do have a moment of weakness, and you confess and you admit that you were wrong, they might humanize you, right? But that's somewhat rare, right? And if everyone's beating up on you and kind of bullying you, one person might feel sorry for you, right? Which might open them to like seeing you in a different light. But that has to be done on a case-by-case basis, right? And it's not like you're ever going to 100% be in control of every time, this shit. You're not going to be like calculating everything in real time. But you could probably do it a lot better than you think you might be able to. And these are important things to remember, because you're going to get into frame battles. Every day you get into frame battles. From arguing with your girlfriend to, telling her, this or that, or your wife, or when you're teaching your children, those are frame battles, right? So these are things that are very, very important. You cannot neglect this unless you were living in a fucking cave and never interacting with another human again. So if you understand these principles, you will do very well in persuading other people to believe what you believe if you're right, or defend yourself against people who are trying to persuade you or dominate you. And it's a good way to test people. But, of course, at the end of the day, like I said, the truth supersedes all, and that should be your main objective. And goodness and integrity should also be your objective, because goodness is the truth. To a certain extent, the highest truth goes above morality, but that's a completely different subject for a different day and gets really deep in the weeds of philosophy and spirituality. So anyways, I've probably bored you enough and probably violated enough of my own principles, but or maybe not. Maybe I did a good job. It won't be good for everybody. Someone clicked off after 30 seconds. Some people watched right up until this last moment, and they're appreciative of the depth in which I expressed myself. Depends, right? Can't please everybody, but you can do a good enough job. And you just learn this skill and to the level that you want. My goal is to perfect it, which doesn't mean everyone gets convinced. It's an interesting distinction. But my goal is to get really good at this. So I'm also still in training. But I'm damn good at it, if you ask me. So anyways, love you guys. Best wishes. See you soon. Ciao.